Hey everybody, it's Steve Dixon here with Keller Williams Edge Real Estate, and I'm here today with Melanie McGregor from the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Halton branch, here in our region to discuss with us a very important topic that I feel is relevant to a lot of us around here. Again, my name is Steve Dixon, Keller Williams Edge Realty. I specialize in local real estate here in the Burlington-Hamilton region, and more importantly, we're going to have Melanie do an introduction of herself and her role and what she can do to help us understand the topic of mental health and awareness a little bit better. So, Melanie, I'll pass it over to you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today. That would be great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for inviting me to take part in this. Mental health is always a really important conversation, but we're hearing, a lot of people talking about it these days. So I work for CMHA Halton Region Branch. And so we do support for people who live with mental health and addiction concerns. We do crisis support. We do mental health awareness, free walking counseling, peer support, just whatever we can to support people around mental health and addictions, help them learn a little bit more about it. So my role is I am the health promotion and advancement specialist. So I do lots of our training. I do things like mental health first aid, suicide intervention, just to help people learn more about mental health and addictions and what they can do to help other people. I also have a column that appears every couple of weeks in our local papers. I do some special events, some fundraising, all kinds of stuff in there. So just whatever I can to help our community learn a little bit more about mental health.
That's great. Really good to hear. So what we'll do is we'll dive into some questions that we had kind of talked back and forth about that, given the current situation with the coronavirus and the pandemic and how it's affecting all of us. I think mental health and awareness, it's safe to say, is a really hot topic right now. So we have some questions we'll go back and forth with you on, and maybe we can help our audience understand a little bit better. So mental health, Melanie, can you describe it for our viewers? What is mental health?
Well, first of all, one of the really important things to emphasize is that mental health is something that we all have. Sometimes people see the terms mental health as, oh, that's something bad. That means that there's something wrong with you. But we all have mental health, whether it's good, whether it's not so good. It's something that we all have, and it can change over time, depending on what's going on in our lives. So basically, how we define mental health is our mental health affects our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. And our mental health is basically what helps us enjoy life. It helps us deal with challenges or problems that we may have. And it's affected by a whole number of things in our lives. It could be, some things that are relevant to this situation, relationships, connections with others, employment, finances, family, hobbies, any number of things can affect our mental health. But again, the really important thing to remember is it's something that we all have. And during this time when things are so different and unpredictable, it's bound to have some kind of impact on our mental health.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, such a broad topic, right? So, okay. What kind of mental health statistics do you have for us? Like, I know in the real estate world, Melanie, I'm always talking to our clients and homeowners in general on what's going on with local real estate. And I'm sure, like any field, people shouldn't be afraid to talk about it, although I'm sure a lot of people are. And I just like to understand, and I'm sure so would our viewers, what are some of the stats that impact us day to day?
Well, we know, again, I said that 100% of us have mental health. So it's a relevant topic for all of us. In terms of some numbers that we know, it's about 1 person in 5 will have a mental health problem in any given year. So that means that in each and every year in Canada, 1 in 5 people will struggle with their mental health to the point that it will impact their day-to-day functioning. And I think that's shocking for a lot of people to realize how common that actually is. But when we think about in a given year, it's 1 in 5. But that doesn't include the number of people who may be affected by someone else's mental health problem or someone else's addiction. So we are all going to be impacted in one way or another. And when we think about some of the mental illnesses that we hear about day to day, things like depression, in a lifetime that will affect about 8% of Canadians. With anxiety-related disorders, it's about 10%. So it is a lot more common, I think, than a lot of people might really realize. So as a message, if anyone is feeling some impacts on their mental health or maybe struggling a little bit, is that you're not alone. It's
Right.
incredibly common.
Okay, that's good to know and good for our viewers to understand that. How do people know if they're experiencing mental health issues? What might be some of the symptoms that people should expect?
I mean, it's really different for everyone. There are some really common types of things that we do see, but in general, what people may be aware of is there some kind of change? Are we as the observers or the person, ourselves who may be experiencing something, is there some kind of change in thinking, in behavior, in emotions? Now, a change in somebody doesn't necessarily mean that it's related to a mental health problem, but it could be. So it's at least having that awareness, having that idea that, maybe wondering, is this maybe due to some kind of mental health problem? But some of the common symptoms or changes that we do see is, first of all, withdrawal. People just aren't as interested in the things that we might normally be interested in. We're not spending time with social contact, spending time with family. We're not doing the hobbies that we might enjoy otherwise. It can affect definitely sleep and appetite. Changes in sleep, either sleeping too much or too little is a really common one, as well as changes in appetite. Either we don't have an appetite or we just feel like eating all the time. Some emotional changes as well. We may feel irritable, hopeless, helpless. Having trouble focusing is another really big one. I can't concentrate, or I just don't feel motivated to do the things that I would usually do. And also some physical symptoms can come with mental health problems as well. Our bodies and brains definitely work together. So if we're feeling some changes with our mental health, it could definitely show up in physical ways. So headaches, aches and pains, upset stomach, jitteriness or tremors and things like that can all definitely be part of it. So again, it's going to be different for everybody, but what we would look for is are we experiencing, or is someone in our lives experiencing something that is different from what we've typically seen with them? Again, doesn't mean that it necessarily is a mental health problem, but it's worth talking about and considering.
That's great. That's a lot of great info for people that maybe seeing some of those symptoms. That's great. Okay. How do mental health professionals diagnose these type of disorders, I should say?
Well, there's a really thick book that's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the DSM, which basically outlines criteria for professionals to make the diagnosis. So say if I went to my doctor and said, look, this is what I'm experiencing, the doctor's going to think to themselves, okay, does this fit the criteria of a diagnosis? So that's how professionals would handle that diagnosis. But for us as, everyday people that may be interacting with friends, family, whoever it is, interacting virtually these days, but we, again, may be seeing some changes and be concerned about somebody. It doesn't mean that that person necessarily has to get a diagnosis in order to benefit from some kind of support. So if someone would normally say, look, I'm just feeling a little bit more down, or I'm struggling, I'm not feeling as motivated, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be diagnosed as depression or an anxiety related disorder or something like that. What it will mean or may mean is that someone may benefit from some kind of support. So not everyone who necessarily struggles with their mental health is actually going to be diagnosed with an illness or a disorder. But some people will, but no matter what the outcome is, there is reason to be hopeful, and there are really good options out there to feel better.
Okay, great. And for those that are impacted, should there be a point where evaluation or treatment is required? And if so, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really common question that people have, because having said that, it's very normal for our mental health to fluctuate from day to day, depending on what's going on in our lives, particularly during this time with the pandemic when things have been turned upside down.
Yeah.
But I think the real question for people to ask themselves is, are these changes disrupting someone's life? So if it's that, yeah, maybe I'm feeling a little extra stressed, or I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, but, I'm still able to get out of bed in the morning. I'm still able to manage the things that I would like to do in my life. Yeah, might not necessarily mean that I would think to get some kind of treatment or access some kind of support. But really one thing that we encourage people to look at is it disrupting your day-to-day life? You know, are you having trouble getting out of bed? Are you not enjoying the things that you used to enjoy? Are there things that you want to do, but you feel that you can't because of these changes that you're experiencing? So I think it would be asking yourself, you know, are you living the life that you want to live, or are these changes in your mental health really impacting you? And that's when we might suggest to people that maybe there's a little bit more going on here. They might want to connect with someone to talk more about it.
I think those are valid points for sure. Something we're going to have a little chuckle a bit about here. What are some strategies to maintain mental health during the pandemic? You know, we've got people dealing with job losses in some cases, some people, you know, having kids at home running around and that sort of thing, when people are trying to be productive at home. How do we deal with reducing that stress and that anxiety? And how can our viewers, you know, cope with that, I guess?
Yeah, I've heard from so many people lately that they're saying, you know, I feel like I'm more overloaded. I feel like I'm busier now that I'm working from home than I ever have been. And I think it's because of a lot of the things you said. There's so many things going on, you know, trying to kids and school and, you know, all those things that we're trying to fit into a single day. So I think some of the tips that I can suggest are, first of all, for people to really be reasonable. You know, we may wake up in the morning with these grand plans of, okay, well, you know, I'm going to teach my kids algebra, and I'm going to clean my house, and I'm going to work, and you know, we have all these great things that we want to do.
There's the chuckle we needed.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, it's great to have those plans, but really look at, okay, is this really reasonable? Like, I've got to say, one thing that I'm kind of enjoying is, okay, I'm not having anyone coming over to visit me at home, so maybe the housework can kind of fall by the wayside a little bit more than it might otherwise. So I think it's just not overloading yourself, you know, realizing that, yeah, even though we may be working from home and, you know, that situation's happening, we still have our limits. There's really only so much that we can do. So I think being reasonable in terms of what we try to fit into a day, staying connected as well. I mean, there's so many great tools, you know, even if it's just a good old fashioned phone call that we can connect with people, but, you know, video conferencing or whatever it may be. Like, I know a couple of friends and we've started, you know, playing word games through apps and things like that and chatting through that. So staying connected as best we can, so we don't feel quite so isolated. I think as much as we can, trying to make time for ourselves. And that goes into being reasonable, that we may look at what are things that we can do for our kids and our family, but also what are we doing for ourselves each and every day? So whether that's, you know, maybe it's downtime that the whole family has, you know, for this amount of time, we're just going to have some quiet time or whatever it may be, building in those things that we really enjoy, you know, make sure that we're getting enough sleep, making time to read, maybe if that's something that we enjoy, getting on the backyard, maybe to get some fresh air. Building in that self-care is always important, but it's extra important when we're under stress. So as overloaded as we may feel, I think it's really key to at least take some time each and every day to do something for ourselves.
I think that's really important. The latter,
Yeah.
taking that time to do something for ourselves. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say, Melanie, that we're living in unprecedented times, and often people perhaps can be fearful about coming forward. What advice do you have for somebody who may be experiencing mental health challenges and yet fearful of coming forward or addressing some of those difficulties?
Mm-hmm. I think in this day and age, one thing that we really should recognize is that some impacts on our mental health are going to be expected and normal during this time. Again, we're living in times of uncertainty. We may not be able to do the things that we would normally do that may really be part of caring for our mental health. So I think just acknowledging that, you know, this is an uncertain situation and some stress is going to be relatively normal. So rather than trying to just reject it and say, oh, I'm feeling stressed, that's really bad, it's acknowledging, you know, that's probably a normal reaction, as miserable sometimes as it can feel. And I think too, just recognizing that you're not alone in that. If you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or whatever it may be, you know, you're not alone. There's lots of people who are feeling that way, and not seeing it as a weakness or a character defect. Often people say, well, I'm feeling this way, so it must mean that I'm not strong, or it must mean that there's something wrong with me. And That's absolutely not the case. We all have mental health and we all may struggle from time to time. And we're in, again, a really difficult situation. So, I mean, telling ourselves, we're doing the best we can. And if we're feeling some impacts on our mental health, hey, that's just part of being a human being, right? In this kind of stressful situation. So I think realizing that you're not alone, and recognizing that there are things that can help you feel better are two of the really key messages.
That's great. I think that's great info. Okay, fabulous. What resources, Melanie, might be available to people in order to seek help?
Well, I find that really support services are being really creative during these days of the pandemic, and maybe they're not providing support in the same way that they used to, but there is a lot of support that's still available. So some of the things that we're doing at Canadian Mental Health, we've had for several years, we've had free walk-in counseling that's been offered throughout Halton. And now we flipped that to be free call-in counseling during the pandemic. So it's totally free. There's no referral or no appointment required. Anyone can just call in and say, hey, I want to talk to a counselor about anything, whether it's something to do with the pandemic or something completely separate from that that's happening in their lives. So how that works is people can call our free call and counseling line, which is 289-291-5396. And one of our counselors will call them back within 24 hours, Monday to Friday. So great resource to know about because it's there whenever you need it. We also have a 24/7 crisis line called COAST. So if people are feeling more in crisis or they're concerned about the safety of someone else in their life, COAST is always available. And so that number is 1-877-825-9011. I know we at CMHA and other organizations as well offer what's called peer support, where it's people who themselves live with mental health or addiction concerns provide that one-to-one support on a little bit of a different level, right? It's someone who's been there, who can relate to what someone may be experiencing. So that's available through CMHA, through other organizations as well. And I would really encourage people to reach out to your regular kinds of supports, whether that's a counselor, your family doctor, whatever it is, and find out how they may be able to provide support to you during the pandemic. But if someone's in a new spot where, I've never reached out for support before, I'm not quite sure where to go. Our call-in is a great place to start, but also thinking about workplace EAP programs, employee assistance programs. Often those can have connections to counselors as well. So that's another great option.
Fabulous. Lots of areas for people to reach out for and to, and nothing to be ashamed of. That's the main message, I think, for today. One of them, anyway. That's great. I have two other questions here, Melanie, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
Thinking of, young families, I'm thinking of seniors and how they're coping as well. And with regards to young families, what is the best way to talk to children about the pandemic and its impact?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's news coming from everywhere, right? Like TV news, online, whatever it is. So kids in our lives are bound to be hearing about that. I know one thing that I've tried to keep in mind with my son is to not tell him more than he really needs to know. Yes, we want kids to understand what's going on around them, but if we as adults are feeling overwhelmed by news and all the information that's coming at us, we have to think that young people may be even more overwhelmed. So I think it's, limiting the amount of information, the news that they're exposed to, explaining it on their level. How much do they really need to know about what's going on? We can certainly explain, this is why things have changed. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Listen to their feelings about it. But I think just limiting their exposure, around deaths or what may be coming, that again may just increase their anxiety as it can with adults. So I think just limiting, answering questions that they have, but certainly answering on their level and helping them cope with feelings as well. It's not just the facts about, hey, this is what's going on with the pandemic, but it's how they feel about it as well. I know a friend of mine yesterday shared a story that she had watched a movie with her kids, some downtime with the family. And afterwards, one of her kids seemed to be feeling kind of down. So she checked in about what was going on. And the child was saying, it was really hard watching that movie. and seeing things how they used to be, seeing people playing with friends and hugging and going out. And
Yeah.
so that was a chance for her to talk around, well, how is the child feeling about the pandemic and what could they do to get through it together?
Amazing. Some good info there too. When I think about people that are living alone, you can't help but think of those people during these times, whether people are in isolating in seniors' residences, or they're in their own unit, or they're in their own home and they're alone.
Mm-hmm.
What are some suggestions on how those people can cope with the current times we're in
Mm-hmm. I think it's thinking about, again, how can we creatively stay in touch, and whether it's the person themselves that's in isolation or maybe other people in their lives, their family or friends, whoever it may be, really explore how, if you can't be there in person, how can you stay connected? So again, maybe that's, video calling. I find sometimes people assume that seniors don't know how to use this kind of technology, but we don't want to assume that. It may just be loaning, say, an extra iPad, leaving it on someone's porch or something like that for them to get that they can use, say with video calling, or even if that technology isn't available, phone calls. It's a good old fashioned way of connecting. And I think really keeping in mind that sometimes routine can really be helpful for people. So even setting a routine of, hey, I'm going to call you every night at 6 o'clock to check in on how you're doing. Even thinking about what does that person enjoy. So let's say they really enjoy doing crossword puzzles. Could you do the same crossword puzzle together over the phone? Connecting over things that they really enjoy.
now?
I think too, asking what they need. What is it that we can do to help? Is it just that phone call? Or maybe do they need their medication picked up? Or, could we help maybe with arranging a grocery delivery service or whatever it may be? And just being creative. I know neighbors in my neighborhood, I've seen people, talking over the fences, they're six
Yeah,
feet
yeah, yeah.
apart, but they're still, yeah, having that conversation as best we can.
Yeah, that's great. I think the physical distancing element is an important piece nowadays, and I think that's some great information. I like the fact of checking in on those people kind of once a day, or set a time or set a ritual to it. And I think that
Yeah.
that adds a lot of value in keeping people in a positive state of mind in the current times.
Hmm. I think it's remembering too that with anyone in our lives, we don't really know what people have been through in their past. They
Yeah,
may have had, trauma or experiences in the past that could affect the way that they're responding to this pandemic. So, as observers, we may think, wow, their reaction seems extreme, or it seems different than what I would have expected. Well, we don't know what they've been through in their past. So I think it's recognizing that no matter who we are, whatever feelings we have during this pandemic, those are valid. And we want to listen to each other and do what we can to provide support.
that's great. I think there's been a lot of good information today. Is there anything else, Melanie, that you might be able to add to this conversation that you think might be of value for our viewers today?
I think just, recognize that the way you cope or the way you feel may be very different than how other people are feeling, and that's okay. We're all going to get through this in our own way. And part of having positive mental health is recognizing our feelings and accepting those and doing what we can to cope. So just, whatever you're feeling is okay, and really think about what do you need. Now is the time to really, prioritize that self-care and take care of yourselves.
Fabulous. Well, I think we've all got some great information today, Melanie, from you. It's been fabulous chatting with you. This is Melanie McGregor from the Canadian Mental Health Association of the Halton Branch, everybody. And my name is Steve Dixon with Keller Williams Edge Realty. We wish everybody a safe and current times we're in, guys. Just keep well, be good to one another, and we wish everyone well. Take care, guys. Thanks so much.